Welcome. We had to do another episode here to show you the start of the season, which has been pretty ridiculous. This is the team that, to review here, we got the top two lines of just beasts. The main three is Brenneman, Bear, and Kozlowski, and then we got a pretty top-notch defenseman, Giangelo, I guess. He is a beast because he's got a huge shot, and he also has a pretty top-level defensive game with 15 rated, and he's got elite skating for the OHL level on the defensive side of things. So he's got a crazy, well-rounded game, and with his number one thing being his shot. And so if you combine top-notch defense and top shot with a top skater, I decided he'd be best as the slap shot guy in the power play. He doesn't have that great a passing offensive read, his mindset, but his puck handling and his shot are crazy. So he is the number one power play quarterback on the defense. And then we have the big three there, Brenneman, Bear, and Kozlowski. I thought on 5-on-5 hockey I'd separate Brenneman because he's such an elite finisher, and so is Kozlowski and so is Bear. I didn't want to have them all on the same line because someone needs to be the setup man that doesn't have a top-notch shot and kind of spread it out a little bit. And Brendan was just too, I think they're just too good to have together. Like, it'd be just kind of a waste almost. So on 5-on-5 hockey, I decided to give Brenneman kind of his own line with nice, well-rounded older players like Friedel, who's a 12 rated setup man. He's an overager. He's got really good finishing, really good defense and really good skating, and pretty solid setup man. Just an experienced player and overall solid player. So having a guy like him being able to set up Brenneman and just have Brenneman pour in a ton of shots. I turned up Zamparo and Friedel's passing, and they both turned down their shooting because they're both not crazy shots. So I thought that'd be a perfect complement to Brenneman's top-notch shot and just have him take all the shots there. Because if you look here, like Zambrano's really good all around. He reminds me a lot of Piercy. It's just his shot's only an 11 with a 4 range, but everything else about his game is really good. So I thought he'd be the perfect two-way forward on that line. Just be an energy guy, big, strong guy who has really good passing and really good positioning on defense, good skater, good leadership, just all around really solid. He's going to be so nice next year when he's 19 and takes over a even bigger role when we lose Brenneman. But yeah, anyways, having Brenneman on the second line by himself is pretty crazy. He also, at the same time, though, he still gets all the power play opportunities, first line power play guys. So that power play is just insane. We got the second line center, the first line center, I guess, is Wall, because he's a really good passer. So we got him in between Bear and Kozlowski. So having him as the point man on the power play with such a crazy offensive game and a passer and skating and stuff, so that power play is just terrifying to play against. And he's such a sweet guy because he'll be that first line will all be back next season. Bear and Kozlowski are not drafted in the NHL, so they should both be overagers, and Wall will be going to his last season, his 19-year-old season, because he was drafted in the 6th round, and his potential is actually skyrocketed to 5, which is crazy. So those top two lines have just been devastating this year, and I really want to make an episode to kind of talk about the stats. We actually started, first game of the season was his 20th. We went 2-0, and then we lost 2, and then we lost 2 more. So we were 2-4, and if you look at that record, we're 17-4. So we haven't lost a game since. We just have turned it up a notch, and we won 8 games in a row at the end of October, and then we didn't lose the game so far in November. So at 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 wins in a row, which is probably the best streak I've ever had. And if you look, it's because of a lot of goals being scored. 9, 5, 7, 6, 9, 10. Shutout 5, 7, 4, 4, 7, 7, 5, 6. So you haven't been under 4 goals really, which is except for the shutout 3-0. So this offense has just been electric. If you look at the game rating, Brenneman has an 86 average game rating this season. It's the highest I've ever had, higher than I guess probably back in the day with Clark, and probably the best we've ever had by a mile. I don't think anyone's ever been over like 75, 80. And then Bear's right up there with them, and then Kozlowski. And if you look, they're just so good. And Wall's actually had a tremendous game rating too, so he's really taken the next step, turning into one of my best players. This has big reason I want to make an episode. I want to talk about the big trade I just made. So, as the left side, we had the 20-year-old Joseph, who's 12 rated, and then we have the 18-year-old Giangelo, and then we had the 19 and 19-year-olds on the right side. Smiley will be back next season, I think, is one of my OAs, along with Barrie and Kozlowski. I really like him. He's a really solid all-around player. We could let him up, though. We have some pretty good depth on D, but we don't really need him an OA anywhere else more than that, because most of these forwards are 18, and we don't really, I think, want the goalie back as an OA because he's not that great. I think my next guy is probably going to be just as good or even better next season when he's 18. So Duquette will take over the reins next year. So I decided the only weakness we really had was that third. We had Stemkowski as an overager. He's a 10 rated. Just a solid, steady all-around guy. And the next rated guy was like a 4, who was my former first-round pick last year, Turnich. But he's still really young. And he's got a lot of potential, but right now he's not quite there yet. His defense isn't quite on championship starter level type thing, you know what I'm saying? So what I did is I actually shopped Holmes. So if you look at my transactions log, if you look, I shopped Holmes because I just so loaded at forward, and there's just so many talented guys in the wings, and I figured he wasn't really ever going to get a fair shot on the top 6 pairing because he's already 18 and all he had was like one more season, and he wasn't even barely like the 12th guy this year. So I decided I'd give him a better opportunity somewhere else, and he's really highly rated. He's a full 1-star and has a lot of green in there, and most teams he'd be like a first, second line guy because he's so talented. It's just, yeah, my depth is built up really good, which is what happened. So the best player I could return in the trade, I didn't even really think about it going in. I just kind of looked at the results, and then they offered up this 10-rated 19-year-old defenseman, and he is a top-notch offensive guy, which is exactly what I need because my second and third line pairings on the right side are both defensive type guys. So what we're actually missing is like an offensive guy other than Giangelo. We don't really have an offensive defenseman. So I figured if he gets injured, we have no one in defense that can really play at a high level on offense. That's a good skater. So he's not that crazy on offense, but he's better than what we had. And he's a double-digit rated guy as a quarterback with really good skating, 13 speed, and good stamina. So he's a guy that can play a lot of minutes and probably be a top 4 guy in the playoffs. So I figured that was way too good to pass up that trade, even though I don't like making trades a lot because I value chemistry a ton, especially on defense, where I think it's even more important. So I don't usually like doing that, but when it's that big of an upgrade, it's kind of hard to pass up. And so having all 6 guys as double-digit rated guys is crazy. So we got, if you go by the ages here, we got 20, 18, 19, 19, 20, 19. So we only have, everyone's 20 and 19 except for the one 18-year-old. So the only 2 back will be Smiley and Giangelo. But we have crazy depth on, and as you guys know, we have that crazy draft coming up with like 10 picks in the first 3 rounds. But yeah, if you look, we have Downs, who's going to be a really good 19-year-old starter next year as a 1-year starter. So a really solid, steady guy with a really good shot, pretty solid all-around player, good intangibles. He can be a 1-year starter, and then we have another guy who can be a really good 1-year starter, Stewart, really good offensive guy on the left side, so he can take over and be that offensive guy on the left side next year. He's almost as good as Haynes, just Haynes had better skating and defense, so I still made that trade instead of just calling Stewart up. And then we have Parr, who can be a really good 1-year starter. He's got really good defense. So we have 3 guys who will be 19 next season. They'll just be the first-year starters, but that's what happens when you get good scouts and just build up your depth a lot. And then on the right side, we lose a lot. We're going to Giangelo back, but then we're going to be able to call up Paquette next year, who's going to be one of the best offensive defensemen I've ever had. So he should be a wicked 3-year starter on the right side. He'll definitely be an OA in a few years and probably be the main right side elite number 1 defenseman on all those teams with those young draft picks we have coming up. So I'm really excited about his future. I've just been holding him back in the minors because his defense isn't there yet, but he is a guy that could easily be playing right now because he's good enough on offense. But since I have Giangelo at that number 1, like if you're not going to be that power play quarterback, your offense isn't that important. So I figured having him there, that kind of holds back Paquette. But that's fine because Paquette's still only 17, so he'll still be a 3-year starter. And then we have Rusk, who we just drafted in the very high, I guess was your 2nd-round pick? Yeah, early 2nd-round pick. He's going to be learning the right side because he's a right shot, but he's actually a left defenseman, which is kind of rare. But yeah, I'll be switching on that right side and probably be a really good guy there next year. So next year on the right side, we'll have those 3. We'll have Down, Giangelo, and Paquette. And then the left side, we'll have Stewart take over and then probably bring back Turnage and then maybe either flip over somebody. But yeah, and then we'll also draft a guy on the left side, probably pretty high. So yeah, it'll be the plan. Anyways, I just wanted to talk about that real quick. Go over the depth. I just want to show you why I made that trade, because I just think this is a championship type year. This team is just so disgusting with that first line. The power play is so elite that Hayes is a guy that I thought was a really realistic trade, bringing in a nice 19-year-old defenseman and not really having to give anything up, a guy that was barely playing, just have a really good depth. So having a guy that can come in and be a top 4 defenseman, only give up a backup, is pretty awesome trade. And so he's even a guy you could even consider bringing back next year. There's no way, instead of Smiley on the right side, just because he's so good offensively. But I don't think we need to, just because of the fact that we just have such a good offensive defenseman coming up next year, and Stewart that's almost as good offensively. So we'll just roll with him instead of bringing back the OA, because I really like Smiley. He's going to be a 5-year guy. He's just so well-rounded. He's so good at everything. He's got such good stamina, such good hitting and checking. He's probably the best hitter on our team. So it's just a really cool guy to have around. I really like his ability and the fact that he's played since he was 16 years old. And yeah, so anyways, other funny thing is I drafted a guy that I didn't really show you much of, but Shepard's going to be really good too. He's a guy I drafted pretty early. He's my 3rd pick. I didn't have a 3rd rounder, so I think he was my 3rd pick of the draft in the 4th round. But yeah, he's a guy I really like. He's got pretty solid 3.5 star potential, my scout says. And he's got a pretty good shot and has some nice kind of average ratings all across the board with some good strength. And I just think he's a guy that developed pretty nicely on that right side. We also took a guy I like named Sengler on the right side, who's a really good offensive player, decent skater, and should develop. His defensive read is just really low, so that's the key, is that goes up. But that's just a young guy who has the ability to get a lot better. We'll see what happens to him in a couple of years, kind of leave him in junior there and see how he develops. And I couldn't pass up in drafting a guy named Ray, which I thought was hilarious. But he's actually a really good offensive player, and he's a guy that I think will probably turn out to be the best of the 3 guys I just showed you in the minors, just because his offensive game's so good. But yeah, so anyways, the season so far is going crazy, and Branneman is just a freak. He has 41 points in 19 games, which is a crazy pace. He has got 17 goals, so almost pretty much a goal a game, and then just over an assist a game. So his stats will be nuts. He should have an opportunity to be pretty steady contributor to the World Juniors this season, and that'll keep him out for a couple weeks, but he should still be able to play 55 games for me. So at the current pace he's at, he should be able to go over 100 points, which would be cool. And that would make him the all-time leading point getter in Barrie Colts history. But then he will be surpassed most likely by Bear next season, because Bear should be back as an OA, and he's just as crazy. He's got 2 points a game this season. He's got 30 assists, which leads the league by, I think, 10 or something. No one else is over like 20. And he's just got nuts numbers. He was just such a steady all-around player. He's so talented. He's got such good defense that he's been nuts. And then the best of the 3 stats-wise, goal-wise, is actually Kozlovsky, because he's got 40 points in 20 games too, pretty much, and he's got 21 goals in 21 games. So he's got a goal a game, which is even better than his 50-goal pace last year. So that top 3 stats they're putting up is ridiculous. And then Wall is in a sweet role. I turn his passing way up, since Kozlovsky and Bear such good finishers on the goal scoring end of things. So I put Wall's shooting down, his passing up, and he's got a point a game and 18 full assists, which is nuts too. Next season he should be able to shoot a lot more, because he actually has a pretty good shot. I just want to save the goal scoring for those elite talents on the wing. So next season he should be able to shoot a bit more as the power play center instead of being the point man and take over from Brenneman. And he's got such crazy overall game with his 6'5" size and his good face-offs and his elite offense. Just the top level players this season are putting up ridiculous stats. And then we have Friedel putting up over a point a game, being able to benefit from playing with Brenneman, I think, on that second line. That's the craziest thing about Brenneman, is he's only playing with those average guys, as Zampero and Friedel are 12 and 13 rated, which is really good, but not like the 18 rated wingers he could be playing with on the first line. So it's scary to think how good those guys would all be together, which they are in the power play. But yeah, it's just like I said earlier, having those 2 elite lines is better than just one, because other teams can really have a really good shutdown player, and then they put that line out against my top line. And I don't want just one line producing at such an elite level, so I think it's perfect having these 2 lines. Brendan is just so elite. I just kind of carry that line on his own. And the third line's actually been pretty solid too. There's a more defensive-oriented line, because the center is such a good defensive player. He's got such crazy positioning, and he's almost at, I guess, 2/3 of a point a game, like 0.6 points a game or something, which for a third line is pretty solid. And that we also have Miranda, who's kind of flip-flopped his role. Last season he had 16 goals. And I started him as a sniper this year, but he wasn't producing. And I realized he was a little bit higher rated as a counter-attacking forward, so changed his role up. He's still been pretty solid. He's only getting 10 minutes a game, so if he had his 15 minutes a game, he'd be closer to almost a point a game probably for that third line. So they're pretty good. And then Zakov, weirdly enough, is not very good, but he got drafted in the AHL in the 6th round. Something about the AHL team liking his potential. And I just realized his potential skyrocketed to 5. That's nuts. That was at like 3.5. So something about his game is just, I guess, better than he's producing, his long-term potential or something. So he's a guy in the third line that's like an NHL guy, but never really done much for me. We'll see what he does next year as a 19-year-old. Maybe take a step forward, but he's a guy that I didn't even realize his potential got so good. That's crazy. And then the better guy, in my opinion, was actually McLeod. Pretty similarly rated, but McLeod seemed to have a little bit better current ratings. And he's the fourth line guy. Is also only getting 10 minutes a game. Even the fourth line's producing pretty well. Weirdly enough, I've been rotating these two, and they're getting crazy stats. Like Stropia had a couple of games on the first line, and he put up some points, and he's over a point a game. And so is this guy. This is the fourth line center. So I don't know what's going on there. I've never had that kind of production from the lower end guy. I know they're really good for fourth liners. Like, this guy's nuts. He'd be second line center in most teams. And Stropia, I think, is even better. Stropia's got crazy offensive ratings. So these two guys are nuts. And just shows how good the team is this year. The fact those are fourth line guys. And then Dodson was actually our second round pick last year, and he's really good as a fourth liner. So I think this team is just so good because the third and fourth lines are staying super fresh. They're actually talented, and they're only playing 10 minutes a game, so they're going all out, and every line is just producing really solid. Now that we got that offensive defenseman in the second unit, I think this team is just going to be even better. The only thing I could see holding us back in the playoffs is the goaltending, but the goaltending, I think, is good enough to get us through. He's got an 888, and he's got 13 wins, only 2 losses. So he's definitely playing pretty solid. He just doesn't have crazy ratings, but that's a position I think we could potentially improve. It's pretty hard to find a better goalie without giving up an absolute ton. This season is just going to be... the original plan was maybe to trade Brenneman, because he's really like the only main piece that we lose. Giangello's back, and then we got, like I talked about, we have a lot of those good solid defensemen coming up. That'll be 19 next season. So we'll be pretty steady on the defense end of things still, even though we lose like 3 or 4 guys. And then offensively, these bottom 6 are all back. Miranda's 18, Zatkov's 18, Holmgren's 18. So those 3 will all be 19 next season. McLeod's 17, Stropia's 18, and Dodson's 17. So we have everybody back pretty much except for Brenneman. And so the only thing we lose is our starting goalie in Brenneman, Joseph, and Hayes next year, and Stamkowski. So it's going to be... the original plan was to trade Brenneman for like a boatload of picks. He's the best player in the league. So if I wasn't doing great this year, I could trade him for an elite package on the return and just really build up that future into like one of the craziest draft boards I've ever seen. Having already like 10 picks, I could trade him for like 3 second-round picks probably, or something crazy or more. But we're just too good to do that. We're just way too talented, and I just never seem to be bad enough to want to fully rebuild. And I thought potentially he could bring back a really high-level first-round pick and then like 3 or 4 second-round picks, but we just can't give him up. Brennan, face of the franchise, probably the best player in Barrie Colts history, and he's the guy that could hopefully bring us Memorial Cup this season. So yeah, that's kind of the update on the team this year. It's just going super well, and I'm enjoying the season so much. I don't want to go too fast and look back and be like, oh, I should have made more trades or something. I think the team's almost perfect, though. I can't see any trade I really want to make. I think everyone on this team is pretty much a 10 rated or higher now. And so we have an entire deep roster with top-level talent on the first lines. And I just don't see really any way, unless we just gave up an absolute ton and got like a 15 rated left side defenseman or something to upgrade one of those spots, that we could get much better. I think potentially we could get a really good, maybe like a 13, 14 rated to play in this pairing right here, or maybe like a 19-year-old that's like a 15 rated, play with Brenneman and then move Zamparo down to that role or something. Because that's the other crazy thing, is we spent the last 2 full years developing all these bottom 6 guys on the left and the right side, which really held us back last year a little bit because we had so many guys learning the opposite side, which they weren't experienced at. But that's going to pay dividends this year because Dodson, Moreno, Zatkov, and McLeod and Zamparo, all know left and right wing at like a 19 level. The only one that's not quite there yet is Zamparo's still an 18, which kind of bugs me. So I'd really, really want to have a guy with Brenneman that's a 20, because I don't want to hold back Brenneman at all, but he should be able to get it. He's been an 18 for a while now, so it should be up to 20 pretty soon. But that's one kind of annoying me a little bit. But Dodson knows both, and yeah, it's like every single person's up to a 20 now on the opposite side, except for Zatkov is still a 17 on the right side, and he's pretty slow to learn that side, but he seems to be doing okay. And then McLeod's pretty much there already at a 19 on the right side. And then Friedel's, I got in a trade and he already knew both sides, which is really cool. He's even a good center, so that's something that we've had. The other awesome thing about it is all the bottom six guys can play multiple positions. We even trained Stroppy a little bit at right wing. So yeah, the only thing we could really do maybe is if we could potentially find a guy that's like 14, 15 rated at left wing, bring him in to play with Brenneman and be in. It's just, you're not going to be much better than Zamparo. Zamparo's really good as a 13 rated. He'll be really good as like a 15 rated next year. So even that's not really much of an upgrade. So yeah, like unless it's just a 17, 18 rated on the trade block or something, I don't see how we could really make any moves I think that I'd really want to make, unless I'm just not thinking of something. Like I said, it would be pretty crazy to bring in like a 15 rated defenseman on the left side and maybe upgrade one of these two, because if you had a 14, a 12, a 12, and like a 15, that'd be 4 or 5 point upgrade over a 10 for a top four pairing. But I think the way it is just the steadiness of those six guys. I'd rather just stick with a more minute spreads top six than really jack up the minutes of the top four and have a third pairing that's not as good. I think we're good enough to just kind of roll with a six and keep everybody fresh. So yeah, I think that's how it's going to go, and just kind of go fast the rest of the year. And like I said, I'll kind of be open to maybe making some upgrades, just because we're so good. You always want to have every option available, every avenue looked at. But I really do think this is pretty close to the finished product to the team I want. So I'm just excited to simulate the rest of the year and see if this team's finally good enough to get out of the second round of the playoffs. And I really, really, really want to win a Memorial Cup this season. So we'll update you later in the year.